This video was a request by Petite1797. I apologize for the delay, but here it is. Attention. This video unsurprisingly contains my thoughts on the Legend of Zelda franchise. Given how the franchise roughly stands as the 16th most popular among video games, keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and what I say will likely never happen. I love the Zelda franchise, like I really like it. It's a franchise that has always had a huge focus on adventure, and this focus pulled me in hard as a 2-year-old. And believe it or not, this franchise got me deeply invested into its lore, even at a young age when my parents just started explaining it to me. My interest in the lore has clearly stuck with me today. I mean, seriously, ask any of my friends, I'm very interested in the lore of this series. I'm even planning to make a video about placing every single game on a single fan timeline, and yes, I know that's very ambitious. However, as with most great creations of man, it has to come to an end sometime, and the official timeline that Nintendo made for this franchise gave me a big ol' lesson of, if you love something, let it go. Alright, so let's get something out of the way from the get-go. This video didn't just come up on a whim. This is something that I kind of came to a realization to after months and months of thinking about it. What I say in this video is something I'm not proud to believe in, but I feel that it is absolutely necessary to be said about this series. And, I'll just lay it down now, if you're not interested or at least not that concerned about Zelda lore, then you'll likely not care at all about what I have to say regarding this. Now, does this mean I'll stop making videos about Zelda or anything like that? Heck no. There's still plenty to cover and I have a ton of things to say about the series. But now that we've got that little heads up out of the way, let's get to the main point here. Why exactly do I believe that the Zelda franchise needs to end? Well, let's start with the legacy that this franchise left behind. More specifically, the lore. I mean, geez, this franchise has some of the most interesting lore I've ever come to know about. Now, of course, there were some confusing parts, such as when everybody first played The Wind Waker or Twilight Princess and realized that something was off. But we have to remember that Miyamoto and Aonuma didn't really worry about the lore back then. Sure, it still was a very important part of the series, but their attitude towards the whole series before 2011 was just, they're all connected for one reason or the other. My attitude from day one has pretty much always been, there's a chronological order for all the games, from point A to point B, but some people beg to differ and say that there's more than one timeline, and to me, that's fine. We all have our own views. So then comes 2011, a year that comes with two very important leaps for the series, Skyward Sword and the infamous official timeline. Skyward Sword, to me at least, was an amazing adventure game that really helped the series out. Think what you will of the game, but my gosh, every entry into the Zelda series made so much more sense after this game. I won't spoil what helped the series out, but let's just say that the actions of major characters are a lot more relevant than what they used to seem 25 years prior to Skyward Sword's release. So, what about this official timeline? Did this extra bundle of information help out the series, or did it put a dent in it? Well, let's put it like this. Say I made a pill that cures cancer, right? Now let's say that I was offering it to a cancer patient, but I served it to them in a glass of steaming hot bleach. I mean, your cancer is cured, but now your body is going to be in critical condition. That's what this timeline feels like, and here's why. It is so iffy. I'm not really talking about the child timeline, as that one is straightforward. And I'm not talking about the adult timeline either. Although I do find it a bit questionable considering how it's in a future that somehow didn't get rewritten. But alright. But then there's the defeated hero timeline. And let me say, wow! This section of the timeline utterly breaks the series. The gist here is that during the final battle between Link and Ganon in Ocarina of Time, Link gets slaughtered by Ganon and he obtains the completed Triforce. I am really not a big fan of this timeline, because 1. How in the world would this link just randomly fail like this? Considering that literally all other links succeed in their mission, the fact that this one fails is weirdly specific. And 2, this rule is easily abusable. It has now set a standard that if a link dies in a game, there will be a slew of games following that death. So that now brings up the questions, what if Link dies in this game, or that game, or in a sequel? So not only is this sequel bait material, but it just confuses the fans so much, as we now have to believe that if a Link dies in any game, there will be more games in the future to describe Hyrule's struggles at that time. And you know what? It seems like this is exactly what Nintendo is doing with Breath of the Wild. Look, I'm absolutely tired of criticizing this game pre-release, but if you didn't know, the Link we play as in this game failed his mission, or at least that's what the story is for now. It could easily change, so I won't be too harsh. But so far, while we don't truly know until we've played the game, this game seems to base itself after Zelda 2, with you being able to see the mountains from Zelda 1, and Zelda 2 specifically saying that the enemies were trying to resurrect Ganon via your blood. Although, at the same time, some of the more important pieces of the lore so far makes it look more like it's a fan service reboot hybrid thingy. But like I've said a million times, we'll have to wait until the game finally comes out. But if this game truly is after Zelda 2, then that means that another timeline can potentially be created. And that thought makes me hope to God that this game is just a reboot, because this timeline is already broken enough. Although, this game is likely going to be on there somewhere, so I'm not going to keep my hopes too high. Now, at least in the adult timeline, it somewhat made sense. After Link went back in time and warned everybody about how Ganondorf was going to jack everything up, the future where you just sealed Ganon became an alternate future that kept going. I can actually live with this, as there is no other game where these specific circumstances can occur. And to be honest, I would much prefer 2 splits as opposed to 3, especially with what I just described like a paragraph in my script ago. So I'm saying all of this to get to one point. The timeline needs to be redone. Well, more specifically, moving all of the defeated hero games somewhere else. I mean, I can't really imagine it being that hard. I understand that there would be some contradictions in the lore here and there, but I would much prefer that to the mess that the Defeated Hero timeline has created. Now, Hyrule Historia itself states that the lore isn't 100% accurate, and I can actually understand this, as even if we didn't get a timeline like this, there would still be plot holes, but that's just the result of the series becoming large. So there's a total possibility that Nintendo could completely rearrange this into something different. So I haven't lost all hope. Now we've reached more sensitive territory. These next few issues are coming more out of my personal opinion, rather than for the sake of the series lore. And it's crazy to think that I have more to say about a topic so negative, but hear me out please. In my personal opinion, the Legend of Zelda series seems like it doesn't really care anymore. I'm not referring to about a decade ago, I'm referring to more recently with what we've gotten. When I first played A Link Between Worlds, I didn't really see any problems with its story, but looking back at the game now, I'm not really sure what Nintendo was on during all of this, because A Link Between Worlds just straight up denies what happens in A Link to the Past, as well as ignoring the Oracle games completely. Yes, I know that in Skyward Sword, Fee said that passing stories down through oral tradition is not very reliable, but come on! How are you just going to flat out ignore 2 games before you? Not to mention that Zelda leaves Hyrule to visit either Holodrum or Labrina in the Oracles. I mean, you'd think that something like that would be, I don't know, noticed by a lot of people in your country, making the events in the Oracles a lot harder to ignore. There seems to be no real excuses for this. Then there's just the fact that A Link Between Worlds is one of the most filler games in the series. The plot, the locations, heck even the ending is pretty similar to A Link to the Past. And to top it all off, items were not located in dungeons, making them rely on one item rather than multiple ones. And yes, I know this game started out as a remake to A Link to the Past, but I guess that somehow justifies making more of the same? Beats me. Then there's Triforce Heroes. Oh boy. It has an incredibly stupid and petty story. The game relies too much on multiplayer to be fun. The single player is utterly pathetic and shows no signs of effort. The costumes can be far too situational. and it completely ignores the absolutely stunning legacy and awesome gameplay features that 4 Swords Adventures had. Look, like it or not, Triforce Heroes seems to just exist just because it can, and that's it. I know I just picked on A Link Between Worlds, and while it is very flawed, at least it still showed signs of effort. And then there's Breath of the Wild, and you know what? If you want to know how exactly I feel about what I've seen so far, check this video out right here. It seems like the series is just doing whatever it wants now. I mean, on one end, you've got a good yet terribly watered down Zelda game. On another, you've got a game that really doesn't care. And then on the last end, you've got what appears to be the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. To sum it up best, I feel that the Zelda franchise is steering away from tradition, but in the wrong ways. Like I've said before, games like Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, and Skyward Sword were all very daring Zelda games, but they all still kept the elements that made me love the series so much. I guess you could say I'm a conservative Hyrulean. Now, keep in mind, Nintendo could totally redeem themselves and jump back about 5 years where Zelda games still felt like complete Zelda games, but that's up to them to decide. But, to be honest, where is the series really going to go even if they changed it back to more traditional times? Both the adult and child timeline wrap themselves up pretty good, so there's really not a reason to keep making games in those. But the Defeated Hero timeline just ruins everything and for some reason keeps getting games. So thanks to this split, the series as a whole is now far more confusing than before. And this whole concept of death where an alternate universe will be created if a Link dies just gives the series a petty reason to keep living. And it kind of hurts to see a lore-driven franchise go down this path. The series has clearly hit a point where it's just aiming at your wallet, rather than getting what needs to be done and ending. So, as someone who's been a fan for 14 years, this is why I believe that the Zelda series needs to conclude.